In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful. This lecture was once recorded, but the audio was not audible. We went in 20 minutes, and I decided to re-record the lecture. Even though the viewers might think this is too much of a hassle, I've recorded, I've recorded our lectures. They weren't recorded, and I recorded the lecture again. So this isn't an issue. So let's begin the lecture. This is one of the most important topics that a human being can speak of. It applies to many human beings. And I will tell you that if this applies to you, it's going to unlock an explanation of the current position. It's going to explain childhood for some people. Okay? And so we have to consider that, considering a 300,000 year time span, so that, from this moment, go back 300,000 years, they're considering right now in our world that that's when civilization began. And when civilization began from then, 300,000 years ago, up to this point, there's an estimate of 117 billion humans that have ever existed. Now, 8.1 billion of those human beings are currently existing. And I am one of those, and you are one of those. What does that mean? That means in the world, as far as human recording goes, on this planet, in the whole cosmos, there has been 117 billion humans, and 7% of all humans that have ever existed are currently alive. Now we go into a very important topic. The reason I'm saying this is that it's significant. Our position is significant. All of you have different DNAs. You have different views to reality. We're all in front of our eyes in one physical world. Behind our eyes, everybody is in their own subjective abode. Anyways, this episode is zooming in on the concept and the importance of realizing. That's why I'm saying when you I realized this earlier than this talk. I kind of pointed at this topic. Like, I've talked about this once, but I haven't dedicated talk to it. So now I'm dedicating the talk to this topic of emotional enmeshment, emotional intrusion, and what does this mean in the development of the psychology of the human being. So I'm going to begin with the research component, and I'm going to read for you. Okay? So ChatGPT 5.2 research component, the academic and clinical view on emotional enmeshment. Part 1. In family systems theory, emotional enmeshment describes a relational pattern in which psychological and emotional boundaries between parent and child are blurred or absent. In such systems, the child is not permitted full emotional separation, and individuality develops under relational pressure rather than autonomy. That's very key. Okay? In healthy development, parents act as emotional containers. They regulate distress, provide stability, and gradually encourage independence. The child's role is to explore, form identity, and internalize safety. In emotionally enmeshed families, this process is disrupted. The parent may unconsciously rely on the child for emotional closeness, reassurance, validation, or meaning. The child becomes emotionally, in quotations, important in ways that exceed developmental capacity. This creates a role confusion where the child functions as an emotional equal, stabilizer, or extension of the parent's inner world. From a developmental psychology perspective, this interferes with individuation, the formation of a coherent, autonomous self, because emotional harmony is prioritized over self-expression. The child learns to suppress internal signals that threaten closeness. The child learns to suppress internal signals that threaten closeness. Over time, this produces predictable long-term effects. Now check this out. This part's going to blow your mind. In emotional development, the child grows into an adult who in emotional development, because of this emotional enmeshment, okay, it says in emotional development, the child grows into an adult who struggles to identify personal needs, desires, and boundaries. Emotions are often experienced as confusing, overwhelming, or secondary to others' feelings. Okay, before I read on, there's activity in the chat section. What are people saying? Somebody says you can be an astronaut for free. You can freely explore the 7th planet in the solar system. All right. Tough crowd. They're like, yo, man, keep singing. Someone's gonna hear it. I'll be like, I've been singing for a decade. By now, I think the whole cosmos has heard it. Ladies and gentlemen, this to you is a lecture. To me, it comes in the format of a lecture where I'm giving a lecture here. Okay? But you don't know what's happening in actuality. In actuality, I'm performing in the world, yo. This is a freaking performance from my perspective. People are like, yo, look at this guy saying nice words, you know? And I'm here realizing that this is the performance of my lifetime. Out of all the human beings that could have existed, out of all the ways, out of all the brains, out of all the antenna that could have received, why am I here in this moment now in this inner room? Why? Because you're listening to a veteran inner realm traveler. But it's not traveling in the inner realms. Pretty much, I want you to know that there's some people who they're familiar. It is a familiar territory. Like, I see it, guys. I see it in all humans. Every person I have ever seen in this lifetime. When I look back at it now, I could see what their soul was walking towards in a weird way. Do you know? So, going back to this. So, I'm going to keep reading the research component. It says in relationships, enmeshment increases the likelihood of codependent dynamics, fear of abandonment during separation. Okay, guys, I have a feeling here I need to explain emotional enmeshment in a maybe more simpler way. Okay? So, think of it this way. When we think of a human being's development, we're like, okay, the human being is developing, like their body is developing in a healthy way. Okay, and then people are like, all right, their mind is developing in a healthy way, but not a lot of people think about if the emotions are developing in a healthy way. I think that is very key. Okay, that means one thing I overlooked, I didn't, like, it passed me, like I didn't care for it until years later I realized how important it is, was emotional, when I came to understand, when I looked at my emotions, I realized not all of my emotions are from me. So imagine you realize not all of your thoughts are from you, okay, and that kind of like spooks you a little. Now imagine what you've been feeling for years, you realize it's not how you really feel. The body is listening to, has a delay. It says in career and decision making, individuals raised in enmeshment systems often seek external approval before acting, avoid paths that cause guilt or relational conflict, struggle with self-directed ambition, excel in caregiving or people-oriented roles while neglecting personal fulfillment. Yo, guys, I'm stepping into uncharted territory, because what? Does that mean women are emotionally enmeshed from the beginning culturally? No, that's crazy. No. Okay, let's not go there. Okay, I don't want to get into that. And it said in career and decision making, individuals raised in enmeshment systems often seek external approval before acting, avoid paths that cause guilt or relational conflict. I think I read this. Struggles with self-directed ambition, excel in caregiving. Yeah, I read this. In mental health, emotional enmeshment is correlated with chronic anxiety, guilt-based self-regulation, depressive systems tied to identity diffusion, burnout from emotional overfunctioning, difficulty asserting autonomy without shame. Do you know what that means? That means if you can't be like yourself without feeling guilty, you were emotionally enmeshed. And guys, what it means is what I'm trying to explain to you is emotional enmeshment means you didn't get a chance to feel your own feelings. Okay? And this happens when you're either the parents are too emotional or the parents don't emotionally care. So imagine a parent like feeds a child, provides resources financially for the child, but doesn't let the child feel its own emotion. That means constantly decides for the child or solves the child's problem. After the child, that's the worst thing parents can do, by the way. So anybody who's a parent, I mean, if your kid's really young, no, help them out. But the whole point is don't solve your children's problems or they're going to expect their problems to be solved from outside, solved from outside of them, you know? That's the most important thing. I'm the more and more I'm living on this planet, I'm realizing majority of human beings are not even experiencing themselves. They're experiencing their early survival strategies. Okay, now back to this. I'm going to keep reading. Neurologically, so ChatGPT 5.2 says, neurologically, the child's stress response system becomes calibrated towards relational monitoring rather than exploration. The nervous system learns that safety comes from emotional proximity, not internal stability. This pattern often persists into adulthood unless consciously addressed. Importantly, emotional enmeshment is usually unintentional. It most commonly arises in parents who are emotionally isolated, unresolved in trauma, or lacking adult intimacy. The harm is not caused by love itself, but by the absence of psychological boundaries. So this was the academic view. I'm not going to read the most advanced view yet, That's part 2. I'm going to talk about this more. And this is where, guys, I'm going to pause the research component and I'm going to share with you what this really means. Why is this important? What does it mean when you realize what emotional enmeshment is? Okay? So the easiest thing to do is to assume there's nothing wrong with you. The easiest thing to do is to assume, success. To bring something that's not like, do you know what I mean? I could feel like I have $1 billion, or I could actually have $1 billion, and then what I have gives me the feeling rather than me having to psychologically feel it. There is like men on the planet right now that they can't, let's say they haven't understood to be themselves or to be simple and decent and realize there's deeper dimensions to reality. For me, I feel like men, sure, objectify women. We're designed that way, but women also subjectify men, right? And one thing I'm trying to tell, especially young men, okay, like I'm not one of those people who's like, yeah, kids, follow my lead. I'm not like one of those guys, but I will tell you, as someone who's like an eagle that's passing by a forest and can just make a noise while he's passing by, this forest of reality, all the different views you can see. Your emotions are important, but how you manifest them, you can choose to do it femininely or masculine. And what's the masculine way of expressing emotions? There is no emotion. It's just like it's not important. Just like bugs on a windshield. Men had to go to war Do you know what that means? That means we're designed to shut off emotions, become a savage machine. Everyone's designed that way, and it's even in cornered animal psychology. I am trying to say that both for parents and children, whichever one of you, and technically you are both of them if you live long enough, emotions are things that you can have autonomy for. Okay? And just because somebody understands emotional enmeshment doesn't mean they understand all their emotions. You know, they just understand that, are their emotions really theirs? Do you know what happened to me? For me, like, I had a breakdown moment, guys. There came a moment where I was like, wait a minute. How do I feel? And is what I feel from me, or is it what the world wants me to be? There's people listening to this lecture of mine, they have expectations, the nature of the human mind. Okay, if it doesn't meet their expectation, bad. If it meets their expectation, good. And that just shows how scattered everything is. For me, it is the legacy of the human species. I serve humanity, but I also serve the original power of this world. It took me up to 2023 as someone born in 1991 to finally remember what an ambiguous feeling. You don't understand. Since my youth, I was knocking on a door. Every night before I would pray, not pray, every night before I would sleep, my mother had told me, like, I was afraid of the dark or something, you know, and she told me, say the name of God 7 times. And for years of my childhood, every night before I slept, I said the name of God 7 times. And every time I said it, it felt like I was knocking on a door. That door unlocked, and what I considered to be God in my youth was the presence of the movement in space. That is the command of God. That means this world is the expressive power of a higher power. This world is designed with intent. Everything that is there in position. Everything. There's destiny not just for the human being, but for the cells, for the atoms, everything that is within your awareness. Because is it really different? Is it really different that I have an awareness to my body, but I have an awareness to my bag right here, you know, or my phone? And it's access to the feeling. Sometimes when you're young, okay, I think in developing countries, this is very much the case. A child doesn't understand. How do I, okay, I'm trying to tell you an example. Imagine you are someone who, I pointed to it earlier, like imagine when you're young, okay, you don't do anything and people applaud you. You know, they applaud you, like you don't put any effort, and people are like, great, you're a great person. I'm going to treat you great, and you haven't done anything. You know? Now that person, okay, before they knew who they were, someone treated them as someone. So this is what parents are doing to raise children. They're already treating them as the person they want them to become. So I'm going to read this for you. Hold on. So these are the examples, okay? Okay. It's loading. Hold on. Okay. So these are examples of emotional enmeshment. I'm reading this for you. Part of the research component. For example, a parent says, in quotations, "You're the only one who really understands me," and regularly unloads adult problems onto the child. Okay? So that's emotional enmeshment. The child is being burdened or being forced to feel an emotion that is not its original emotion. Okay, it's not arising from its own autonomy. It's being put into its moment, or it's being given it. Okay. 2, a child feels anxious when a parent is upset and believes it's their responsibility to fix their parent's mood. Did you hear that, folks? I'm going to say this again. Think closely about your childhood. A child feels anxious when a parent is upset and believes it's their responsibility to fix their parent's mood. Three, a parent responds to independence with guilt, saying in quotations, "I guess you don't need me anymore." So if the parents like, "I guess you don't love your parents anymore. I guess you don't care for us anymore." That's a sort of emotional enmeshment. Now, it doesn't mean your parents don't love you. It just means these are unconscious. Like, they don't know what else to do. This is like, it happens. Like, you can't really hate the past because they didn't know better. Okay, so this is why we really can't judge. Like, even if there were evil, messed up people in the past, or even evil, messed up people controlling, like, resources on the planet, it'll be like, okay, they didn't know better. If he knew better, he'd realize that if everybody improved, the world would improve instantly. That means, why be a ruler of an undeveloped world, oh shadow elites? Oh powerful people on the planet that are controlling this. Okay, why be powerful in an undeveloped world? Advance everybody, advance the world, and in an advanced world start thinking about what control and power means. Why control humans? Think bigger, advance the civilization, make everything incredible. At least the Medici family had that sort of value. You know what I mean? They had some sort of honor. They weren't completely honorless to the degree that they identified with the dehumanized. I don't care who you are on this planet. We must care for the human species. It is the game we're here to play. Humans are dealing with human problems on a macro and micro level. When we solve the macro problem, suddenly a bunch of micro problems get solved. So I've dedicated my life to trying to solve the macro problems of the species, and also because I'm incredibly bored of how much of life loops throughout the day. It's very boring. So you need to find purpose. You need to start exploring. You need to wonder about, what do you really feel? It broke my heart as a man in his 30s to realize that I have been living through emotions that were never mine. That means you might, I'll tell you, you might sometimes be a coward, but you might not understand. You're not actually a coward. It was the programming. And once you actually go into the battlefield, you suddenly see how strong you are. You suddenly snap out of the shell shock and realize there's a capable vision there. For what else are we? We are visions enabling greater visions until everything is greater, to the degree that we realize our legacy. Everybody is eternalizing. You're eternalizing in regards to how your existence is influencing everything at all. And people are like, "Yo, man, we're just a statistic." I'm like, "Nah, guys, we're not just a statistic. We're also people who are ruining the earth." We're not just a statistic. Like, I have a weight. I make the earth heavier, yo. I add weight to this world. What the F does, do ethereal beings do? they're like, yo man, people call me fat, but how do you know if I was a little bit slimmer, maybe the Earth's gravitational field would mess up. If I was a little bit thinner, who knows? Maybe like a tsunami happens somewhere. Like I gotta be careful about my weight. Anyways, I'm gonna keep reading this list. These are examples of emotional enmeshment. Even the word enmeshment sounds like there's something wrong with the word. Example. A child avoids making life choices that might emotionally disappoint a parent, even as an adult. 5. A parent treats disagreement as rejection rather than difference. A child feels selfish or disloyal for wanting privacy or emotional distance. A parent refers to their child as their, in quotations, best friend, instead of maintaining a clear parental role. 8. A child feels responsible for keeping the household emotionally stable. It took me a while to realize I'm not responsible for how others feel, because even if I choose to be responsible, I have no clue how they're feeling. Do you know what I mean? Another example, a parent becomes threatened or hurt when the child forms close relationships outside the family. So probably single parents this is gonna be heavy. We're gonna go to 10. Example 10, a child constantly monitors a parent's tone, mood, or body language to stay safe. Another example, a parent expects to be consulted on every major decision in the child's life. 12, a child feels guilty setting boundaries, even when those boundaries are reasonable. A parent takes the child's emotional struggles personally and says, why are you doing this to me? And I understand this personally, guys. I'm as somebody who, for some reason, his destiny, I guess, was intertwined with smoke. If you have a Middle Eastern parent, you're 100% emotionally enmeshed. 100%. Yeah, I don't know how it can be avoided. Because children don't realize you are a belonging. You are your parents' most important belonging. But parents also have to have the wisdom of releasing the child. Okay, and do you know why they say the age of adulthood is 18? This is a trivia question. Does anybody know? Okay, I don't have a classroom audience like that for them to answer, but anyways, I don't have enough viewers to ask a question like that. But I want to tell you, it's like, yo, man, there's one viewer. I'm asking a question from the audience. Pretty much, it means that I can totally understand. I'm not a parent yet, but I understand it. I can see it. A person can see fireworks from a distance. It doesn't mean they had the experience of it up close, but it means they still can see it. They can see what it is. And pretty much, children, it doesn't occur to them that, I think for many, a child is pretty much a human being that is unaware and irresponsible, but is free. And it's so important for children to feel free, because you don't know how messed up it is to not feel free in the only world you're in right now. Do you know what I mean? People are like, yeah, man, Earth is my home. And you ask them, do you feel free? They're like, how can I? How can you feel free? And you know what the most bizarre thing is? You think this is Earth. You think that just because our ancestors named the world, that's the world. But I don't want to go into that, because I go into that in other lectures. I really want to talk about emotions. And I am an incredibly emotionally aware late bloomer. Okay? That means I understood emotions in I guess maybe even perhaps a dehumanized way I handled my emotions. Do you know? Because I think every soul has their own strategy to their circumstances. You know, my strategy was that it's like I was suffering in the outer realms, so I was like, why am I being anything in the inner realms? So in my youth, I roamed as nothing in the space. And years later, I realized there was all the moments that I wanted to say something, but I was shy and introverted and I couldn't express myself. I didn't feel it was okay to express myself. No human should feel that because everybody's experiencing this for the first time. Do you know? If I had a time machine, I'd just go back to my youngest self and just explain the concept of honor and tell it, buddy, not only are you experiencing yourself for the first time, everybody is experiencing themselves for the first time in that moment, in that sequence, in how every moment changes. Do you understand? And we take it for granted, and I have to grant humans like their comfort. You don't understand. The human species is a multidimensional. It's. I don't want to say hundred. God knows the unseen. I'm a user in this existential simulated system, the system admin, which is beyond the world room and beyond the system, and is an unconditional being, knows how all the conditions have been commanded to move. I don't know, but from my observations, every moment is a void filling up with all the strategies that that soul has ever known. I don't know how to explain it to you. That only in front of my eyes I am an individual. Behind my eyes I am the moment where I find everything in. I find my body in my awareness. And they're like, you're just your body. But I'm like, wait a minute. I see way more than the body. They tell me I'm my mind, I'm a thought. Like majority of the human species thinks they're thoughts. How weird is that? Why is that there? And how is that even possible? How can a thought think that it's another thought? How can a thought think? Think about it. Even if you have more than one thought, do you know, then you're not just a thought. If you are an awareness to more than one thought, how can you be a thought? You're not a thought. Okay? And what you actually are, to get real here, is an unknown life force, and this body of yours is a life form made known. So to be honest, what we think is, yo man, I'm an individual in this world, yo, I'm so special and unique, is simultaneously being a condition of existence. And I don't know, I just have this feeling of activation. Do you know that feeling of like, imagine these like spaceships, like whether in sci-fi movies or in actual spaceship footage, of how they start freaking, what do you call that? Like, to me, I'm here to run the advanced engines of civilization and then drift into that original moment where I had never existed to have even been a risen or fallen being. Because seldom is this said, when existence can be conscious of all existence, it cannot be existence anymore. And what you're witnessing on earth is an outdated, ancient biological system in a very modern, unnatural civilization trying to survive in this man-made system, and the whole time being like, man, when do I get some time off to go and feel like a natural being? And so civilization is so inefficiently designed that it is draining the people that are working. Do you understand? You know what's tragic? Okay, what's tragic in today's economy, I will say this to any economist, do you know what I mean? Any freaking job creator, you know, on this planet. Human beings have a value beyond the environment. And what made us mighty was that our attention saw beyond the environment. You don't understand how huge that is. We got out of the food chain because we started to have such a complex pattern recognition that the creatures around us couldn't understand how we were ahead. Okay, somebody is being disrespectful in the chat. Somebody says, is that Earth? Yes, it is. What type of telescope are you using? I'm not using a telescope. You're looking at a computer screen. What telescope are you using again? I'm not using those. Somebody says, oh, never mind. You're boring and don't engage with chat. Anything you don't understand is boring. And if you are in a boring moment in a world, wonder why you are there. Wonder if you have not seen anything that fascinates you. You have never wondered beyond what you have been fed. If humanity was sheep, they fed it grass and it believed the grass was, the reality, the only reality. And I don't need sheep, I don't need sheep to in some sense, how do I say it? It's like this, how do I explain it? Ignorance is boring. Looping in ego is boring. Seek the beyond, seek the unknown, or you were never alive. That's how I respond to the chat section. And by the way, man, if you can't be polite, maybe you shouldn't be here. Thank you. All right, to continue. I'm talking about an advanced civilization and people are being rude in the chat section. Should I be surprised? I'm going to continue this list. And what's funny is I'm talking about emotional enmeshment. I'm talking about the value of allowing emotions to naturally arise. Anyways, I'm going to keep reading. It says, a child constantly monitors a parent's tone, mood, or body language to stay safe. A parent expects to be consulted on every major decision in the child's life. A child feels guilty setting boundaries even when those boundaries are reasonable. Oh no, sorry, I read these. A parent takes the child's emotional struggles personally and says, why are you doing this to me? A child suppresses their own emotions to avoid burdening the parent. A parent subtly discourages independence by questioning the child's ability to cope alone. A child feels that leaving home emotionally or physically would be a betrayal. A parent reacts emotionally when the child's beliefs or values differ from their own. A child grows up feeling responsible for the parent's happiness. A parent becomes emotionally withdrawn or cold when the child asserts autonomy. A child feels more like an emotional support system than a son or a daughter. Okay? So those were examples of it, guys. That means if you were responsible for the emotions of others when you were young and you couldn't figure out what your own emotions were, you're emotionally enmeshed, and you gotta pause this video game of life for a moment, wonder anew about, okay, how do I feel if I had no obligation? Just for one moment, free yourself of what the world wants to see what you've wanted. In today's world, when I see masses, there was that whole hustle culture craze, right? And everybody's like, yo man, I want to be a billionaire and have a yacht and a Bugatti and all this. And I was like, okay, when you have masses of people saying the same thing, that's when they have been cloned. They have that means their own original unique life has suddenly shifted and they have cloned into another. Now granted, in order to succeed both in the outer realms, I wouldn't say in the inner realms necessarily, but in the outer realms, let's say, in order to succeed in the outer realms, yes, you need to find the proper algorithm. Okay, it doesn't matter if it's a video game, it doesn't matter if it's a business, you pretty much have to, your mind has to access a more advanced way something can happen. And when that becomes real for you, your attention normalizes itself towards where it's competent. So now the second part that's left is for the research component is okay, there we go. And then guys, this is ChatGPT 5.2. I'm reading it, and I'm reading this not only because I want to hear this later on in the future, but also because we gotta see how far we've seen to go further. That means you don't know. If they told me, Mr. Within, who are your best listeners, like people who listen, are they people who, like, listen to exactly what you're saying, like do exactly what you say? I'll be like, no, those are people I gotta remind them who they are. Do you know? But I'm telling you, those who listen to these talks of mine realize I'm a member of the human species that has seen this far. And if you can see my blind spots or even see further than me and actually go further, then you are a true listener, Mr. Within listener. If you just hear these ideas and feel good, I understand. You're not, these talks are maybe like required to be secondary, like not, how do I say it? The point of these lectures is about expanding, erasing the human awareness. For me, I realized, okay, I'm going to die at some point. I'm going to leave this system, so I got to find a strategy in this system. And then I wondered, what is everybody's strategy? And I realized everybody's living for their future self. Then I wondered, okay, they're living for their future selves, but it's like they can't see a bit further that their future selves are in an advanced future world. And so if everybody's too busy living in civilization, who's designing it? Who's designing it if we're all living in it? If you are born as a soul and you want to fit into this system, you don't have time to wonder about if the system is right or wrong, or if there's other ways reality can happen. Do you know? And you might not believe this, but we are living in a sort of cyborg era. But instead of it being technology, and cyborg means like biological human with like technological components, right? Like half human, half robot, right? And right now, human beings are half natural entity, half unnatural, ideologic, linguistic entity. We are linguistic cyborgs. We're not just see, if animals, like, let me tell you what's funny. Okay, if animals suddenly we attach like advanced AI and they became conscious enough, we attached the AI that did the job of the prefrontal cortex, and suddenly all animals could notice humanity and suddenly their brains could activate. Okay, and imagine like a squirrel suddenly realizing, what the F, this whole time this advanced human species has been living in a higher dimension where through the sounds of their words and shared meaning, they've been acknowledging each other by names. It's going to blow the mind of, like, it's going to be dangerous to give consciousness to lesser species. Do you understand? Because they're not going to be able to fathom, what the F, you guys are living invisibly, fictionally behind your eyes as selves who are trying to live non-fictional lives in front of your eyes. What the F? Do you know what I mean? It's going to scare the squirrels. We don't want to scare the squirrels as the human species. Don't scare the squirrels, guys. Even those squirrels have scared me, man. Sometimes I've seen animals that I'm like, okay, this is a possessed animal. Like there's an entity interfering with this animal, you know? To me, it's attention, you know? If you want to know like how I feel close to God, like how I personally feel like my distance to the system admin, I feel that I am in the attention of the system admin in the same way if a politician was giving a speech and an ant was on the podium. I consider the presence of an unconditional being so beyond any condition I can fathom that in the presence of such a being, the conditions await higher command. That means, could it be that we're not just 8 billion humans, we are 8 billion lost souls waiting for the divine command? And what if the divine command was there? What if we realized the religious book is true, holy, it is revelation, but in no way we can say human understanding of revelation is divine. Revelation itself is divine, but we cannot know, like, do you understand? That means, how do I explain this? People confuse humans with ideas. And so they think the idea is bad because the human is bad. Do you know? And that is a fallacy. That's a mistake. That's an error. Do you know? Like right now, I'm Iranian, okay? And I'm someone who in my lectures I've talked about like royalty and kingship and all this, you know, kingdoms and all that. Do you know? Even kingdoms in the clouds. It is the might of the final force. Emotional enmeshment, emotional intrusion. How do you really feel? And this is such a bizarre question, and I don't know, for me this is a question there, like I'm like, okay, this is one of those personal things, you know? And there came a moment and I asked myself, how do I truly feel? And do you know what happened? At first I felt like the same, and then there came like a glimpse, like a nanosecond where I felt something different. And I was like, wait a minute. How do I truly feel? And I realized I've been acting as if my environment in my childhood was a debt collector, and every moment I'm paying that debt. Do you know? As someone who's experienced self-sabotage, as someone who I pretty much I experienced, it's kind of good because the moment I got out of those states, I can talk about them. Do you know? But only to that which is needed. For me, design is key. The design of reality, the design of your moment, the design of your view, the presence that is the whole moment. So I'm going to keep reading this. Part 2, the most advanced view. At a deeper level, emotional enmeshment represents a structural failure in human development. A child is an unfinished system. A parent is meant to be a stabilizing one. What an incredible explanation. A child is an unfinished system. When a parent cannot contain their own emotional complexity, the system seeks equilibrium by absorbing the child into the parent's emotional field. The child becomes part of the parent's internal regulation mechanism. This is where the future is altered. Okay, let's pause here. So what this is saying is, imagine a parent, okay, and they're going through something emotional, okay, and instead of, like, imagine a single mom, okay, imagine a single mother, okay, and they go through something emotional throughout the day, and there's no masculine pillar for them to lean on throughout the day. And so this single mother goes through some emotional turbulence, do you know? And comes home, and the children feel the mother is upset, and the mother doesn't say anything, and the children love their mother, do you know? And so the mother, you know, she's like, I got nobody to talk to except my kids, and the kids are like, how are you, mom, or something, do you know? And so in that moment, she expresses it to the moment, as if sometimes emotions that we can't diffuse or resolve within, we exert outside. These are, I don't want to say these are insecure people, but these are people who are fear loneliness. They fear the solitude of their own consequence. You know, people who bring down others as they're falling, they're afraid of falling alone. So they bring down all their realities as well, which is an error. So I'll read that again. When a parent cannot contain their own emotional complexity, the system seeks equilibrium by absorbing the child into the parent's emotional field. The parent starts telling the child, "Man, your father's such a bad left me. I'm so sad. You guys don't listen to me. All of this." The parent starts saying, the single mother starts saying that. Now the child's like, "Whoa, what do I do with this? This is emotions that are not arising from me, but I care for my parents, but I'm also a young kid and I don't understand what's happening." So the kid's like, "Mom, what should I do to make you happy?" Do you understand? Because the mother puts an express effort to make the children happy. Children are not stupid, they understand. you know every soul understands kindness. It's a power. It's the greatest power. Mother Teresa, to me, had higher power levels than Goku from Dragon Ball Z. You know what I mean? Because she chose the path of kindness regardless. Granted, she was old, but she chose human care. She chose to care for the human that was starving on the ground over anything. Do you understand? She was like scared. She was fighting a battle of like, yo, there's humans dying here when we are this advanced. We have video games, yet there are people dying on this planet. Like, advance humanity, all systems, immediately. It's like, unite the species. Bring forth the United Species Council. Let there be the United Species Day. Let there be just one anthem for all of us to sing, and it's pretty much going to be like, yo, we're humans first, and then we identify with everything else. And we must care for the human form. That means you might dislike someone's attitude. You might not like their personality. But you cannot ignore that they are a member of your species. They are a soldier in the army of the future of the species. All of them. I don't care if it's like some, cute Japanese girl that's as fragile as a butterfly. Do you know what I mean? Or if it's some like thugged out, heartless, cruel, like, equivalent to like RoboCop gangster. Do you know what I mean? I don't care, because there is 8.1 billion versions floating around of human beings. What's important is the ability of shared meaning. Okay, guys? And you know what shared meaning, why it's so powerful? Right? And you can't have shared meaning unless somebody expresses meaning. So I gotta express meaning so this meaning can be shared and we can wonder about things. But back in the day, it was equivalent. Like I'm telling you, what I'm doing is not so different than back in the day. Back in the day, some dude was like, hey, we humans are smarter than the other animals because we can acknowledge each other and not kill each other, and we formed a tribe. Let's all use spears, like sharp spears, surround the mammoth and have food for a month. Or not a month, but like, let's say a year or something. Right? And so all the human beings were like, yeah, that makes sense, yo. And that was shared meaning. And then they all got spears and like scared the shit out of a mammoth, The mammoth is like, what the fuck? It is very important we realize in the same way I am saying the species should identify with the species. That means I don't care. That means this is how it would. This is what the view would be like, guys. I don't care where you're from. I don't care. Or let me say it differently. Okay. What's important is your human experience on Earth, your natural human experience, is more important than any other identity. That means you know what like when I say talk about an advanced civilization, you know how it happens? Like one way I've envisioned it was like these advanced beings arrived on Earth, and each action was equivalent to like 1,000,000 actions, Somebody in the chat section says the Earth is flat. And guys, I figured it out. The only way the Earth can be round and flat at the same time is if it's a 2D circle. We're living on a coin, yo. It's round and flat. End of the myth, yo. Everybody relax. But if people by a flat Earth mean like a promised Neverland anime situation, I agree. I think I like my mind's wondered about that. Anyways, I'm gonna keep reading this. The child, so this is the most advanced view. The child internalizes a silent rule that governs adult life. In quotations, my independence threatens connection. My needs destabilize the system. My value lies in maintaining emotional balance. This belief fragments identity. Instead of becoming a self-directed agent, the individual becomes a relational stabilizer, someone oriented toward maintaining harmony rather than expressing truth, desire, or direction. Authentic selfhood is delayed or replaced by adaptive roles. Exactly, that means all the time that you should have been yourself, the psyche is adapting to make the moment, to satisfy the moment. It says at a systems level, emotional enmeshment prevents psychological sovereignty. The self never fully consolidates. Identity remains reactive, relationally defined, and constrained by emotional obligation. This pattern does not stop at families, civilizations repeat it. When emerging generations are burdened with stabilizing unresolved emotional structures of the past, progress slows. Creativity becomes cautious, innovation becomes risky, growth is replaced by maintenance. The most advanced truth is this: children are not meant to carry emotional inheritance, they are meant to generate new futures. Healthy parenting is not emotional closeness without limits, it is emotional containment with presence. It says, my pain is mine to process. Your separation is not abandonment. You owe me nothing for your existence. Only when a child is allowed to fully individuate can they develop a coherent self. And the purpose of life, guys, is to maintain a coherent self from the beginning to the end, pretty much. So it says only when a child is allowed to fully individuate can they develop a coherent self, capable of love without fusion, responsibility without self-erasure, and leadership without inherited guilt. A psychologically advanced humanity depends on this clarity, because a child who is free to become themselves does not merely heal. They prevent the repetition of emotional structures that keep both families and civilizations psychologically trapped. Well said by AI. So guys, what does this mean? It means that, okay, now I'm done with the research component. I'm going to say a couple things. I'm going to pretty much explain to you like how I perceive value in this notion. So in my life, in my development, I wasn't conscious of my emotions. So I was playing an emotional role. So it was like, how do I explain it? I wasn't allowing myself to actually see how I feel. And I didn't even respect myself. And because when you don't respect yourself, it doesn't mean you don't respect the world. It means you respect the world more than you. When you don't respect yourself, or when you look down on yourself. And so these people who become people pleasers, it's because they're not allowed to see how they actually feel. They're not allowed to be like, all right, it's okay to feel. It's okay to have your own feelings. It's okay to dislike something and stay true to it. It's okay to like something and actually trust the feeling. And think of it this way, a child is developing, and the whole point is the child is developing through the parent's ideology, okay, and then enters society and ends up realizing, okay, I am responsible for how I move myself. And when earlier I said this, but I never explained it, I said, do you know why the age of 18 is like why they consider a human being an adult? Because that's when the prefrontal cortex is fully developed in the brain. Do you understand? The brain is not fully developed until 18, which is a fascinating notion. which means how much are you not seeing when you're how much are you not seeing about the reality, what's going on when you're young, and even when you get older, how much of what actually reality is inaccessible to the human position. And yet humanity is still fascinating, because ultimately in an unknown world, unknown beings began moving in ways that allowed them to know, to create, to generate a known self. Okay, so right now, yes, I do have a name. I am in a named world, but my name and that named world are simultaneously being the presence of an unknown world and an unknown self. And therefore I am force beyond form, as we all are. And that force is here to be directed. So my formed life is what am I going to physically do here, but my life as a force of life, as a life force, that force, the point of consciousness, is to be capable of decide its direction, like how your energy expresses, right? Anyways, folks, ultimately there's so much we cannot see, but this is just emotional enmeshment means that allow people, it's important for every human being to see how they truly feel before they are forced to feel something. Do you know? And this is why in relationships, for example, they call it, what was it called? Love bombing. Like that's why it's unhealthy, because it's like the language is, or the language is suggesting a role that ties to an emotion that's not developed there. Or like some people like use the word love so easily. They're like, yeah, I love this. Do you know? Or I love you. They say the word, but the word has no weight because they've said it so much. Do you know? And once you realize that things need to take their natural development, then reality changes, right? So for me, I do understand that being a human being is like an unnatural, um, you know, psychological field of intelligence operation. When I say field of intelligence, like I mean legit, where our thoughts come from is a divine field, but because we cognitively receive it, I've given a lecture called The Divine Cognitive Fields, and the whole point of it is that we're a node in a field rather than an individual in a world. The field is the original reality, right? And that field, excuse me, the field is an original command of the original being, okay? And so truth has no equivalent in Islam. I'm Muslim, and I believe in if we're in a if we're 8 billion souls in a box, okay, if we're 8 billion beings in a box, right? Islam is saying God is beyond anything in the box. Christianity is saying God was a specific individual in the box. The Buddhists are saying God is the emptiness inside and outside of the box are the same. Atheists are saying, nah, guys, there is no outside of the box. Do you know what I mean? Right? And for somebody who realizes that you cannot see the edge of a form unless there's a space to the unknown. So form is visible between two unknowns, or think of it this way, there's an unknown presence and known forms, and let's say even personality formations arise. But you got to be aware that whose emotions are there. That means I used to be someone, I no longer am this one. I scold people who they try to emotionally manipulate me. Okay, and do you know what that means? That means they okay, I don't want to, like, relationships they each have their own different geometry, do you know? But some common patterns is pretty much you're looking at the responsibility levels of human beings. Okay, and those have a rank. That means if somebody's responsibility level outranks somebody else's, it doesn't matter how much they have in common. Do you understand? It's as if like their attention is different, or their sensitivity to reality is different, of course. Anyways, folks, where I'm going with this, emotional enmeshment is a very interesting idea. Go look it up and realize that this whole time, they've told us how to keep our body healthy. They told us how to keep our mind healthy. They have not talked about, are we emotionally healthy? Okay, and right now, I think, I don't know, but I think a majority of the human species, and especially the younger generations, they might be physically healthy, even psychologically healthy, but a lot of them are emotionally unhealthy. Okay, and they don't realize it, right? And so, and why is it emotionally unhealthy? Because their emotions are not naturally arising from them, their emotions are being given to them by the environment. Do you know? That means it's about how humanized or dehumanized we acknowledge people. We live on a planet that we have divisions of not just class system but status systems, right? That means like masses of people dehumanize celebrities. And then when they go around the celebrity, they're like, "Hey, celebrity, I'm your fan. I saw your videos yesterday. Do you know? I saw your videos that yesterday, celebrity. Sincerely like you, you know." And the celebrity's like, "Buddy, there's billions of people approaching me. I have no clue who you are. This shit can get scary. You know what I mean? Like, and so it's what I'm saying is it's so funny that human beings are playing all sorts of games with one another, but as you realize, the greater games have to do with the potential of the species, not the potential of the individuals. So the great souls among you are those who care, who can see the furthest in the future. I think in every friend group there should be one, but usually I think these souls are rogue. You know? And it's all about like just thinking about our emotions, guys. You know? Like, let me read something for you. The dictionary says enmeshment is a concept in psychology and psychotherapy introduced by Salvador Minuchin to describe families where personal boundaries are diffuse subsystems, undifferentiated, and over concern for others leads to a loss of autonomous development. According to this hypothesis, by being enmeshed in parental needs, trapped in a dis- discrepant role function, a child may lose their capacity for self-direction, their own distinctiveness under the weight of psychic interests. Excuse me, what? It says there a child may lose their capacity for self-direction, their own distinctiveness under the weight of psychic incest, and if family pressures increase, may end up becoming the identified patient or family scapegoat. Ah, okay. Freaking weird language to explain it. Enmeshment was also used by John Bradshaw to describe a state of cross-generational bonding within a family whereby a child, usually of the opposite sex, becomes a surrogate spouse for their mother. Oh my God, yeah, this shit goes into Freud. Yeah, guys, pretty much it just means there was a moment where you had to figure out, like, you had to develop autonomously your emotions. Okay, you had to like become responsible for your own emotions. But you, instead of figuring out how you feel and becoming responsible for your own emotions, you became responsible for the emotions of the environment. You started making the environment more important than you, and instead of you actually prioritizing how you feel, you cared for how the environment felt, and you missed out on actually feeling who you were when you were young. And years later you grow up and you're like, wait a minute, why do I have this sort of emotional turbulence? Or not turbulence, but why do I feel like, you know I don't trust myself, or I don't know, or anyone who has a vibe that you don't know who you are? It's because you have the feelings of someone you're not. So just to be aware that there's an emotional game going on. It's a dimension. There's emotional development. There's intellectual development. You know, and there's psychological development, physiological development, and there's emotional development. And emotions are kind of vague, but the closest understanding of them is that they're signals. They're warnings. They're like if you suddenly feel something, it's like the moment is communicating something to you, right? And that means that your subconscious awareness to everything is communicating to the main node, the identity, if you're living as an idea. Some beings just are their presence throughout the day. I don't know. You don't have to be an idea all the time. The moment is present even if you put an effort or not. That means if you have to put an effort to be an idea, if you don't put an effort, you're just present. That presence is being. Anyways, thank you for listening. Wonder about just emotional development. And when they say stay true to your feelings, it doesn't mean like you could have emotional reactions. That doesn't mean stay true to your reaction, to your emotion. This means that stay true to your emotions, but also process the moment as a mind. That means wherever you go, scan the moment. Legit, if you see how sparrows land on branches, like I've given talks in parks a lot, right? And when I started out, and there would be like some of my only viewers were like a bunch of sparrows on a branch, and their necks would move so fast, like left, right, every direction. They were just scanning everything. Do you know what I mean? They were like building a 360 view of them for themselves. It's crazy. And we're like, look at these like simple creatures. The neck movement of sparrows, probably if they build a camera like that, it's going to be the most incredible camera ever, based on the neck movement of a sparrow. Do you know what I mean? Like that's how advanced, that's how fast the neck of sparrows move. I don't know how I'm getting into this, but so moving on from sparrow neck movement, so pretty much, guys, awareness to emotions, and just wonder about what emotions are from you, what emotions are not from you, in the same way you've wondered about what thoughts are from you and what thoughts are not from you. Do you know? That means if you don't know how you're feeling, most likely the world has already made you, the world will fill that void. So you gotta either live your life, or life is gonna live through you or contain you. To me, it's all about like, okay, why is this unique ability of the human species to notice way beyond any species has noticed here? Why are we aware of that which seems unrealistic? Like you're telling me we got brains that can envision flying cars, but we don't have flying cars yet. We have private inner realms, like we have these private room where we can think about things. We think what thinking is. What it is you're actually seeing. Do you know? Because thinking has no value. Because what are thoughts? They are the content of your inner realms. But they're not thoughts. Like that word is like a distraction from the actuality. Anyways, thank you for listening. In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful, and the most advanced.